everybody in here gets a name.
You're not entirely off because I record here and I have this tendency of rounding up on my people who are here.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. You know why? I mean, and I'll tell you why. Because I had teachers that did that same to me. So, you know, I pay forward, you know, so teachers that showed me that, I rewarded back to my students. So
Thank you.
if you're ever crazy enough to get a PhD, do it for your things.
Yeah, some people just like never come. It's crazy.
I don't understand it, and I look at the grades, and I just, or even worse are the ones who don't even look at, I mean, a record who watches the videos, I know who watches them, but don't even do that.
Gee,
Yeah,
so I honestly hadn't watched that many, to be honest.
well, because you're here,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, that makes more sense. I
I mean,
mean,
the Zooms, you mean?
yeah, like these, I have them on my YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah, is it open to the public?
Yeah,
What's it called?
it's just, G. David shows. I mean, that's it.
You just
Dr. Dave. Dr. Dave is what it's under.
Dr. Dave.
Dr. Dave.
You got other content.
Yeah, I can't just say Dr. Dave because some people say Dr. Dave.
No, Dr. Dave is a professional billiards guy.
That's not.
Where are you? I'm trying to.
Only you would look for G
No,
period.
it says I just looked at it.
Yeah. G period David Giles. Because
Oh.
my first name is actually George.
I like that name.
Yeah, thanks. Everyone in my family where we all go by our middle name.
I'm not kidding. I'm seeing videos of David Bowie high. I'm serious. Is David Bowie high?
I'll send you my YouTube.
I found it.
Oh, you got it? You got it. So,
May 1st, chapter 11.
there it is. Yeah. So I mean, yeah. I actually have like 600 subscribers.
David Bowie needs to eat some more.
David Bowie ain't eating anything. David Bowie's at room temperature.
Oh, he's eating dirt is what he's eating.
How many subscribers? We got 582
Same
subscribers.
500, he's swagged out.
Get paid.
I'm that cool, by the way.
Okay.
You get a YouTube cut.
Yeah, not yet. Okay. I got a congratulations when I hit 500 subscribers. I figure when I hit 1,000, I'll be an influencer.
Yeah.
For what it's worth. But I've actually thought about extending the channel and doing things like,
You should do shorts and stuff. You're a great orator.
well, thank you. I was gonna do ones on points of parity and points of difference and do the product life cycle and a couple of others. I've got a couple of the marketing, the graduate strategy ones. I've got 6,000 views
Wow.
on a couple of the ones that are buried down there. So
Thanks.
yeah, the chat, what is it? Kotler and Keller 15th edition is used like all over the world.
Uh-huh.
I had a kid from India, you know, send me something and said, my friend says that marketing isn't that important. And I said, you know, the number one people in any organization are marketing people.
Yeah.
You know, and the top accountants in any organization aren't working on accounting, they're going out and finding customers. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah.
Like 12 years ago.
Okay,
2,000 views. Look at that. Dude, I swear.
okay. So how do you build commitment? The two things that comes from, the test, as I said before, is 50 questions, multiple guesses. So you'll know your grade immediately. As I've said before, if you want to take your test at a different time, please email me so I can put the override in. It opens at the moment that it's supposed to, but the opening is more than just 2.5 hours because I recognize some of you may log in instead of 8 o'clock, you might log in at 8:15. I understand that. And the way that the system is built, it would like slam shut if I were to use the exact times. Okay. So the opening time is like, if it's 8 o'clock, it's actually 8 to 11 instead of 8 to 10:30. And instead of 11 to 1:30, it's like 11 to 2. So that you have you got a 30-minute time window, in other words, to log on, all right? Because once you log in, you have 150 minutes, all right? And so that's why I have that opening area. If any of you have issues, just let me know. There's also be a second one, which is going to be 6 points bonus. And it's 3 questions and you have 2 minutes to do it. And one of the answers is Morgan and Hunt. All right, and if you figure out the question, you'll know what that is. Commitment trust theory. Okay.
They wrote it.
Yep, Morgan and Hunt, right, commitment trust theory, so that's one of them. But they basically come from the conversations that I've had. You can take it or not, it won't hurt you at all. Just give it a shot, and if you make it, hooray, and if not, well, you didn't lose anything, all right, so. And that's pretty much what I have about the test right now. So let's finish this up talking about how do you build commitment and how do you build trust? And then finally, the relationship life cycle. Realize that commitment gives the expectation of continuity. It is the belief that you can plan for the long-term horizon. And these bullet points are just basic stuff. You won't see these bullet points there, but it's an understanding of the expectation you should have is that all of these things increase in the presence of these things. One is when you trust someone. The other is that you have open and active communication in both directions. That you're known as being fair. You have a long-standing, stable relationship with another channel partner. You have both a mutual dependence and a mutual balance of power. Now, as I've said before, it may be diversified power. In other words, it's not perfectly equal on each side, but it still is balanced. And then goal congruity, which is combined stakes and common goals. Goal congruity means, as we talked about before, the successful use of power is when the power is exerted to provide an overall system-wide form of success. And so commitment increases in the presence of these. And I'm not going to say that trust is the most important, but certainly if you looked at Morgan and Hunt's plan, they say that trust leads directly to commitment. So the key to commitment is mutual commitment. If I'm going to commit to another, then I must be committed myself. Yeah, I'll get it. Now, this mutual commitment is an important issue here because you can't deceive commitment. The truth is that people are very poor actors. I mean, the truth is we may be fooled by some people some of the time, but we're not fooled by all people all of the time. And that eventually people show themselves to be what they are. And so, given this fact, deception does not last. It requires you to grift from one partner to another. Because eventually, without honesty erodes commitment. Remember, we are known by our deeds and not by our words. And so it is our actions that matter, and that organizations do not gauge intentions by what they say, but what they do. And once you are cognizant that the commitment on one side is less than yours, there's what's known as the theory of the equity principle, which basically means you will commit just as much as you believe another person is committing. Now, the equity principle also states that there has to be not an obscene balance. It means that you don't immediately leap into commitment, but that commitment comes in stages. And so it's a multi-stage process to go down as well. To get commitment to increase, the one party has to convince the other that its commitment is higher by doing actions, and then allow the concept of reciprocity to raise to their mutual commitment levels. In other words, you got to give first. And so when Dr. Harrison came from East Tennessee State, one of the things she got to do was to talk to Volvo about her MBA students, which I had no problem with, because as a matter of fact, I told her, I encouraged her to get a chance to talk to them, because I would like to see a commitment between us and East Tennessee. I think we have some excellent students together, and I would like to see ultimately like a mutual analytics competition between our two universities. But in order to get a commitment, I have to show in my actions that I am willing to commit to. And so mutual commitment is absolutely essential. And so what are some of the actions? Well, before I get to that, let me give you an idea of building commitment. And so if I am a supplier and I am looking for distributors, one of the ways that I do that is I limit the number of suppliers I go to. I deliberately do that when it is against my average strategy, which says if I'm a manufacturer, I want to sell as many products as I possibly can. And the next reasonable alternative means I want to have as many outlets as I can. Well, if I limit the number of outlets I have, that just demonstrates a level of commitment to the suppliers. It assures them some level of protection. If I practice as a manufacturer direct selling and I have what are called house accounts, in other words, accounts that I sell directly to, and I allow the supplier to sell directly to them, that also helps. But if I don't, that undermines commitment. If I feel the need to keep house accounts, it says that those individuals are hands-off. So in essence, what you do is you treat them like a friend and a partner. Or even more so, you treat them as the way that you would like to be treated. It's not that hard. But this is one way that you build commitment, and that's by being selective. Now, it might hurt you, but in the long run, if your suppliers are properly motivated, they can do all the selling you need. One of the actions that I do is I create or make what's called an idiosyncratic investment. And if you remember that word from vertical integration, idiosyncratic means a uniqueness that is not easily copied. And so an idiosyncratic investment is an assets that dedicated to your relationship that can't be redeployed in connection to anyone else. It means I'm sinking my money in you. I'm focusing on giving you training that is different and unique from the others. And that it can only go in one direction. These can be incredible commitments, like a willingness to buy a supply from them, or perhaps special returns, pledges to continue this in the future. And then, as I said, relationship-specific investments, such as unique advertising that you don't apply to anyone else. And so an idiosyncratic investment is an action in which you contribute to that relationship that can't be done in any other way. So imagine if you're a supplier and this distributor invests in you in an idiosyncratic manner. It gives you greater selectivity. It means that they have more empathy towards your system. They've listened to your concerns, and they're willing to help you in a unique fashion. it states that they want to help you in the long term in more than a cookie cutter kind of way. It says that you're willing to part information with them about innovations, share what's coming down the pipeline. All of these are excellent ways of building a substantial commitment, but it breeds trust, I should say. And so while we're talking about it, let's talk about trust. Trust is easy to conceptualize, it's difficult to define. Trust is conceptualized as a confidence that the other party is honest and that the other party acts in a benevolent fashion. They are well-meaning. They are concerned about your welfare. For the difficulty of understanding what trust is, we know it when we've got it, and we know it when we don't, all right? It's one of those hazy things that we have no doubt about. Because as I've said, people are very poor actors, all right? And that in the short term it's possible, but never in the long run, all right? People are pretty smart. So what are the ways that we can lead our partners, our friends, our compatriots? One is to create economic satisfaction for them, because economic satisfaction leads to trust. Now, economic satisfaction is an emotive state. Emotions, by the way, are evaluations, all right? When you talk about pleasure, arousal, and dominance in the themes of emotive states, Marabin and Russell, arousal is an immediate reaction. Emotions are always an evaluation. You know, emotions are an evaluation to a series of circumstances. And so what economic satisfaction is a positive affective response to economic rewards that are generated by the channel relationship. Well, why is it an emotive state and not a utility? Well, the problem is that it's hard to measure money once against each other, all right? It's thought of as more of a general state versus a specific dollar amount. But it is a response, nonetheless, to an investment. And so what kind of investment? Well, we talked about idiosyncratic investments that are unique. Well, now we're going to go further. We're going to talk about risky ones. We're going to talk about generic investments that can be used by your channel partner anywhere they go. You've increased their product knowledge. You've broadened their horizons. And now they have the willingness and the ability to spread their wings further than you. And so when Steel Tools goes and they pay for 30% of the improvements on a retail establishment, they're not saying that all of that has to be used just by Steel. That room could be used for their competitors. And that's the risk. But no reward comes without great risk. The better we get our partners to perform financially, the more satisfied they are and the more they trust us. And that's why the desires for economic satisfaction, the willingness to allow growth to happen to our partners, that brings about a satisfied state by us willing to invest in them and make our own selves vulnerable, is ultimately what leads to that desired success. So that's economic satisfaction, and then there's non-economic satisfaction. All right. Mostly non-economic factors all come into organizational and interorganizational trust. Instead of being coercive, we want to be non-coercive. We want to be known as problem solvers, the willingness to solve the situations together. And so this is where we talked about this Monday, and we talk about it again today. Make sure to hammer this in, is the thought of procedural fairness or justice and distributive fairness or justice. And procedural fairness is the sense of being treated fairly in a day-to-day basis, regardless of reward. The sense of being treated fairly in a day-to-day interaction without the consideration of reward. Distributive fairness is gaining equitable rewards, rewards from the relationship, regardless of the day-to-day interactions. And so they are separate but needed together. I'm being treated day-to-day fairly without consideration of what rewards I'm going to receive or give. In distributive fairness, I am receiving equitable fairness in terms of the rewards, regardless of my day-to-day interactions. All right. Both together, they create trust. Remember that unfairness undermines trust and horrifically ramps up and exacerbates the problems that come from conflict. It means also that you will have difficulty in resolving conflicts. Unresolved conflicts are what's known as dysfunctional conflicts. The final thing you can do is be selective on who you choose as a partner. So the amazing thing is the truth be told, is that many channel manufacturers, they have virtually no screening whatsoever. They usually use their first impressions on somebody, or like if I ever needed something that, if I were practicing in the gray market and I called the wholesaler in Houston, all they would say is COD cashier check, and I don't care. And that's how we became channel partners, cash on the line. But if you adapt elaborate qualifying strategies, desire to know more about who your potential partners are, that is conducive with building trust. It shows that you are selective and that you have been selected. And so the building of trust that way the willingness not to just simply invest in any Tom, Dick, and Harry that comes down, I think is extremely valuable. Just remember, you have to prevent unfairness. It undermines your trust. It aggravates the negative effects. It creates unresolved conflict or dysfunctional conflict and creates opportunism. It creates the ability for your partners to move on. So once again, this is Palmentier mixing together his metaphors, but fairness and justice mean the same thing. It depends on whether you're using industrial organizational psychology or you're just using anything else. Justice is more an IO psych, fairness is used everywhere else, same thing. Unfairness is basically relationship acid, it'll kill the relationships dead on the vine. And so above all, do what you can to avoid those two situations. And so we are led to the thought of what's known as the channel relationship cycle. Now, one of the things that has to be noted is that no relationship is linear. In other words, when we have relationships, we don't become immediate friends, we don't become immediate acquaintances. It basically is fits and starts and jumps and bumps, and that's just the way human interaction is, whether we're talking channels or otherwise. But generally, there's certain stages when we're talking channels, and this is what the channel relationship life cycle is around. There are 5 stages, and I got to say the difficulty with this thing is that it's not in a circle. All right, it starts with awareness, it goes to exploration, it goes to expansion, goes to commitment. It can stay on commitment, but if it goes anywhere else, it can go to decline to dissolution. And so what is awareness? Awareness is just a recognition that person exists. They know they're there. You may run in the same circles, like when I was the store manager at Omni in Lafayette, I knew who the manager was at Intercomp, I knew who the manager was at Entree, but it's not like we hung out or palled around together, we just knew each other, all right? We may actually use the same channel partners in the same places to get things from. We might even trade things if we need to, help each other out in the bind, but it's not like we really have anything. We're just simply aware that the other is around. Doesn't mean that we're, anywhere through it, okay? The next is exploration. Exploration is when you start testing and probing to see whether a relationship can possibly exist. You start, instead of trying to trade with each other, you try to probe each other's interests and interactions and nature to try to know who the other individual is. You start to try selectively revealing information, because once again, in order to start having relationships, you have to be able to be willing to give something of yourself. You start to do test transactions with each other. There starts to be an interdependence too. And you start in what's called, relational norms. You start to have ways in which you talk to each other in a relational and normative way. And so you start building the blocks or building towards commitment. This phase is easily terminated. The key thing is that you draw inferences about the other side and you test them to see if your inferences are correct. To ask them if they'll do a solid for you or something like that. Now, the biggest phase, the fastest phase, is called expansion. And one of the things I wanted to note here is this article by Palmentier, the guy who wrote our book, and he talked about the concept of relationship velocity. And what he found is this little chart here that shows that commitment is rarely linear. Once again, it's what I've said before. And so what they found is this change in customer commitment over time when they did the research. So it shows that the bumps along, and it gets to a certain level, and then it dramatically goes up, and it could equally dramatically go down. And so this is this whole point. I mean, we've all been in relationships where we've had friendships, and all of a sudden there's one particular thing that happens, and before you know it, you have a relationship. It happens, okay? And so this is the expansion phase, and it works also when we're talking about channels as well. And so what you find is that there's a mutual connection and that benefits expand on both sides. That interdependence starts to expand and you engage in very risky behavior. And by risk behavior, I mean risk taking. You commit yourself to generic investments equally on both sides. Cooperation increases within communications, the goal convergence happens. You start to have a greater commitment towards a systemized success. Your alternative partners look less attractive to you. You find that there's a desire to stay. The thing here is that the momentum has to be maintained. You have to keep it up. Each party has to find new areas of activity in which to invest each other, and the investments has to create mutual payoffs. They continue to bring success. And then finally, we reach the commitment stage. And this is where each party is fully committed and you're investing in maintaining the relationship. You start to have a long time horizon about the way that you think of each other. You're aware of other alternatives, but you really don't care about them. There's a very mutual high dependence and a very mutual high trust. You're able to resolve conflicts. You're able to work things out, and you're willing to share risk with each other. And the key features here especially is loyalty, adaptability, and the continuity of willingness to carry on. And the last is disillusion and decline. And usually this is sparked by one side failing to engage in reciprocity when another side is giving something. And this dissatisfaction leads to a spiraling effect. The key behind this also is while it takes two to create a commitment, it only takes one to break it up. Told you it sounded like Dr. Phil.
I was doing it the whole time.
Yeah.
The whole class.
It really is. I mean, you know, it's all relationship stuff. This is the things I've been talking about forever. And it's the same things that you know, make good relationships. All right. It's as simple as that. If you want to have a good relationship, you have to be willing to commit. All right. Now, are you willing to commit unless the other side is willing to commit? No. So how do you know whether you do it? You have to give first. It's the only way. If you give first and it doesn't come back, well, then you know. All right. It's sometimes a hard lesson. You've slipped on many banana peels in your life. I've sat on many cream pies, but no regrets, you know. So as I've talked about the stages, remember that relationships are not linear, they're not orderly, they're not sequential. They're as manic and frantic as people are, but each one requires a different level, a different strategy and hope in which to hopefully survive and grow. And so in the early stage, you need to communicate and a willingness to show your expertise. In the mid-level between expansion, you need to make those generic and idiosyncratic investments and hopefully build a reciprocity. The equity theory states that if someone becomes committed to me, my desire is to become as committed to them. We want to be able to be balanced in our relationships, which also is the reason why it freaks you out when you go from a buddy or like I just met you to this person wants to live with you for the rest of your life. Okay. Equity principle doesn't work that way. All right. For anything to last, it takes time. And in the late stages, in the commitment phase, you want to avoid neglect and betrayal. whether indifference is worse or not than betrayal, I don't know. They're both pretty funky. But they lead to conflict, and the worst of all is unfairness. And that's the death. So all of these lessons can equal life as well as they can equal equal the channels. But in channels, you have an answer to these questions about how do you manage it. This is a 2-point bonus question, just to let you know while you're here. How do you manage the channel process in a successful way? You have a portfolio of channel relationships. You don't have one supplier. You have many. And so relationships require maintenance, and they can wear out even if they're maintained. And if you understand that, then what you do is you have to have more than one relationship. I do not suggest this in your personal life. I've tried. Yep. Doesn't work. Okay. So just like you have a diverse portfolio of stocks, you need a diverse portfolio of relationships in the channel system. You need to diversify your risk because relationships are always at different stages. And so to manage that, I hope you're not diversifying your risk.
No, I would not mess on my buddy.
Okay, all right. So anyway, this is the key, or the success behind the successful relationships in the channel environment, is that you need to be able to balance them and just recognize these things in a dispassionate way. All right. Quite simply, it's understanding the channel partners, willing to respect their needs, and the willingness to have goal convergence where you're both growing to something together to achieve a mutual success. And that's ultimately what builds successful channels. And we're done. So these are the conditions that favor relationships, how to build commitment and trust, managing the life cycle stages, and the importance of portfolio relationships. I will be grading frantically over the next couple of days. If you need me, I'll be most likely in my office. It's been a pleasure teaching you. I hope you have a great summer. If any of you need recommendations, come to me. I'll be more than happy to give you. My pleasure. Y'all have a great. Thank you.